Hello everyone, Vulcan here, and today I want to bring you a discussion video regarding Emerald Semblance, how it works, and potentially who has a semblance that can fight against it or even counter it. So to know this, we need to first understand the mechanics of her semblance, as in what conditions need to be met in order for someone to be caught within her illusions, and what the limitations of her semblance are. So the general premise of her semblance is actually quite simple in that she can essentially take control of all of your senses. She can make you see what she wants you to see, hear what she wants you to hear, and even feel what she wants you to feel. That is extremely powerful, and we already know that it can influence the minds of very battle-worn warriors or very experienced fighters such as Crow and even Amber, so mains are also not out of the equation. So the only condition that apparently needs to be met for someone to be caught within one of her illusions is for them to be within her direct line of sight. Emerald doesn't actually need to make any physical or even eye contact with her targets, and this was seen during Volume 3 in Yang's fight against Mercury and Pierre's fight against Penny. During those fights, neither of them would have had any time at all to make eye contact with Emerald, as they would have been concentrating completely on their fights. And also considering the fact that Emerald would have been hiding somewhere within the stadium, within the large crowd, and neither Yang nor Pierre could have ever suspected Emerald Semblance to be what it is. Emerald Semblance has a number of limitations to it. The most obvious one is what we saw in Volume 3 when Emerald tried to use her semblance on two people at the same time. When she did so, it caused a severe strain on her, which eventually led to her suffering from a headache. So for that reason, she doesn't typically use her semblance on more than one person at a time if she can help it. The other limitation, which is really more of a theory of mine as there's nothing really confirmed about it, is that she can only use her semblance so many times within a certain span of time, within a certain period. The reason I say that is because in the episode The Beginning of the End, when Emerald first encounters Cinder, she could have easily escaped from Cinder by using her semblance, by catching her in one of her illusions. Of course, she didn't do that, even though she could have, and we know she could have because Emerald can even influence the minds of mains. So that says a lot about just how powerful it can be. Yet despite that, she chose not to escape from Cinder, which leads me to believe that Emerald can only use it so many times within a certain period. So far in the story, there's only been one person who was able to break free of Emerald's illusion, and that was Amber during the episode The Beginning of the End. However, that did not have to do with any inherent ability that she possessed that protects her from the influence of someone else's illusions, that protects her from mind control, basically. If she had such an ability, she would not have been caught in an illusion a second time during the fight either. We already know of a character who can definitely defeat Emerald in a one-on-one fight thanks to Word of God, and that character is Neo. Neo is by far one of the most accomplished martial artists in the entire show, and it's easy to conclude that she is a better fighter than Emerald, based on what we've seen of them. However, the other thing that I find curious is that Neo's semblance can act as a perfect defense mechanism against Emerald's. The reason I say that is because of the way Neo's semblance works. Now, Neo's semblance is very similar to Emerald's in that it can fool someone into seeing something that they shouldn't be seeing. Although the mechanism of Neo's semblance is very similar to the way a chameleon manages to hide itself from prey. A chameleon changes its skin in order to blend with its surroundings better. Neo's semblance works in a very similar way in that she can alter her own appearance or the appearance of her surroundings, or even leave after images, which is what we saw in painting the town at the end when Neo made her escape alongside Roman. The reason I say that it's a perfect defense mechanism is because if Neo were to trigger her semblance before Emerald, Emerald would inadvertently trigger her own semblance, trigger her illusion on a false image, and that would give Neo an advantage. Now this is important because it shows that by way of misdirection, Emerald's semblance can affect the wrong person or the wrong thing, and that would give her opponent a decisive advantage, particularly when taking into consideration that Emerald can only use her semblance a certain number of times within a certain period, and particularly the fact that her opponent needs to be within her direct line of sight. So if someone were to be able to escape her line of sight by way of misdirection, the way Neo would with her semblance, then that would effectively make them safe. Now, there are a number of characters currently present in the show who can use a semblance that can be used for the purpose of misdirection. Now, you probably know at this point that I'm thinking about Blake, Flint, and Sun, who are able to create perfect or near perfect replicas of themselves, particularly in the case of Blake and Flint. Blake, who I'm going to be talking about first, is able to create a single clone of herself, which effectively looks exactly like her. The original purpose of her semblance was to create an after image and fool the opponent into thinking that they had managed to strike her. In the most recent episode, however, it appears to have grown a lot stronger in the sense that it can now influence her surroundings. In previous volumes, Blake's clone was simply an afterimage. It did not have any corporeal form or able to influence her surroundings in any particular way. But in the most recent episode, her clone was able to fling her into the sky even further than a simple jump would have done. And that's completely new because it shows that her clone now has a corporeal form which can influence her surroundings and is therefore implied to be able to not just leave an afterimage that can trick an opponent, but also attack. This is closer now to what Flint and Sun are capable of doing because their clones have often been capable of attacking. Flint's clones are quite limited though, in a certain sense, because although they are near perfect replicas, the only difference being that the color scheme are different, as shown by the different colored tie and hat. Their movement is actually quite limited. Sun's clones as well, they don't have the limitation of only being able to move in certain ways, but it is very easy to tell who's the real one, of course, because his clones look like manifestations of energy as opposed to perfect replicas. So in that regard, I would say that Blake's semblance is potentially the best suited to counter Emeralds, because if she can grow her semblance to be able to create more than one clone, even two clones, that would give her a very, very strong advantage against Emeral'd, because Emeral'd cannot influence more than two minds at a time, and considering Blake's clones are perfect replicas, it would be basically impossible for Emeral'd to tell who's the real one. With Flint and Sun, it's a bit easier because as far as Flint is concerned, if Emeral'd bears in mind what his real color scheme is, then all she needs to do is affect Flint's mind, the original Flint's mind, and that would, my theory would be that it would influence the clones as well, because given that the clones don't actually have a mind of their own, but are actually dependent on what the user of the semblance wants them to do, then all four of them would effectively be influenced. The same applies to Sun. Of course, this is assuming that the clones that Blake, Flint, and Sun create are not independent of them, the users. If they were, that would of course make things a lot more difficult for Emeral'd, even though Flint and Sun have the obvious weakness of the real ones being evident when their semblances are activated, particularly Sun. However, there has not been a single indication throughout the entire show which would suggest that the clones are able to act independently of the user. So, should Emeral'd catch the original Blake, Flint, or Sun in her illusions, then that would of course extend toward their clones, because they don't have a mind of their own, but rather are dependent on the mind and the actions taken by the user. So there you have it. We can definitely conclude that the best semblance suited for countering or fighting against Emeral'd semblance is one that focuses on misdirection. We know for certainty that Neo semblance is very well suited for it, because misdirection and deception are Neo semblance's exact purpose. Blake's as well in a different manner, in that she can create after images. Basically, if she can use her clone in the right manner, she can potentially escape Emerald's line of sight and thus prevent Emeral'd herself from catching her in her illusion. She would not even know that she caught the wrong Blake as well. And it would be interesting to see as well how Blake's semblance will grow over time, because we're still pretty early in the series. So I see it as a very strong possibility that eventually Blake will be able to use more than one clone at a time, because we've never seen her do that. We've never seen her use more than one clone. So that's it for my discussion video here. Like the video if you did. Comment down below what your thoughts are, and who else you think would be ideally suited to fight Emerald Semblance. As far as we know, characters like Cinder or one of her cronies like Evil Obi-Wan and Hazel, we don't know what their semblances are, so it's impossible to tell whether or not they have a defense mechanism against Emerald Semblance. They could have one, but we just don't know. So yeah, discuss it down in the comment section below. Once again, like the video if you did, and subscribe to my channel for more, and I will see you around.